On today's episode, it's something a little bit different for you. I have got Tamara Cincik, who is the founder of think tank Fashion Roundtable. Now, you may remember Tamara. She came on back in January 2020 talking about the skills issue that was potentially going to happen post-Brexit. Well, I got a phone call from Tamara this weekend just gone saying, Kate, you need to listen to the radio. There's Cluny Lace on there. They're the last manufacturer of lace left in England, making Nottingham lace. They're saying they're in terrible trouble. They may have to close. It's all because of Brexit. So I thought I'd get Tamara back on today to talk about our thoughts about what's happened to Cluny, because since I posted about Cluny's plight on our Instagram, there's been an outpouring of support for their business. No one wants to see a heritage manufacturer like Cluny Lace having to shut down. So I got Tamara on the show today to discuss the issue and to see what could be done and how this even happened in the first place. So here you go. Let's go over to my chat with Tamara from Fashion Roundtable.
Thanks, Kate. So my name's Tamara Cincik and I set up Fashion Roundtable November 2017, and it came out of an awareness through my background in the fashion industry. I've worked as a fashion stylist and editor and with brands really since the early 90s, but I've also worked in Parliament, and it was while I was working in Parliament, which was during the time that the negotiations with the EU and the UK were at their height, that it became really, really obvious to me that other sectors were really engaging with Parliament and government. And that meant that they were getting better outcomes for their sectors. And it was actually working in a different industry that made me really realise I'm a fashion person through and through. And I think it's a brilliant industry. And what is pertinent to the topic of what we're going to talk about is that I've actually got heritage in it. I'm actually half English as well as half Turkish. And on my English side, my great-grandmother worked as a couturier tailor. And all of my kind of matriarchal family are really, or were, my great-grandmother and my grandmother were amazing at making clothes, knitting, crochet. They were craftswomen really, and my mother used to make me clothes. We literally would go to Truan's in Watford, which was part of the John Lewis partnership, and buy the pattern and the fabric that night, and then I'd get a dress the next morning. That was how I was brought up. And so that kind of textiles side is woven into my English heritage or my British heritage, because my great grandmother was actually half Welsh, as well as my Turkish heritage, where obviously it's part of the culture. So it's just woven into both sides of my heritage. And, these are skills which are part of our DNA wherever we come from. And I think that we are losing them at pace. And once they're lost, they can't be brought back, which is why I'm so glad we've done this kind of emergency podcast, Kate.
Well, exactly. So I got a message from you on Sunday going, Kate, you've got to listen to the radio, Broadcasting House, BBC Radio 4. There's a chap on there from Cluny Lace. He says he's potentially going to go out of business. He's down to 4 staff because of Brexit. And it's not like you didn't warn everyone. And the outpouring of support for this lace company. I mean, to explain a little bit more about the situation, because I've dug into it a little bit more, the issues particularly that they have around Brexit is the fact that 50% of their business pre-Brexit was to France. And I can understand that, because they're making top-end lace, the couture houses in Paris, it's much sought after. And they're also doing their dyeing in France as well. So they're having to ship the lace to France and then bring it back again. I would imagine that's because we're so short on dyers in the UK that whatever they're doing with the dyeing, it has to come back in.
So presumably before we left the EU, the fact that they had to kind of double dip and that they had to take the lace to France, dye it and then bring it back wasn't a problem.
No, but obviously that's something that's happened because of the textile industry in the UK already being decimated. I mean, this business, Cluny Lace, have been going since 1730. The guy running it is 9th generation of his family. And of course,
my hairs are going on end just thinking about that. That's heritage. That is living history. So I take it his family were Huguenots originally that had came here ironically from France.
probably were, yeah, I would
Yeah,
imagine.
so
Yeah,
along with the silk weavers in East London.
yeah,
So this is part of the living history of the textiles and fashion industry of the UK, and it is an interwoven, interconnected global conversation. Um, and we can all have ideals of working towards more localized supply chains, but industry, the Silk Road was built based on silk coming from China through
yeah,
other territories, including Turkey, to the UK, and all the spices and foods. And that's why, quite frankly, English food is a lot better than it used to be. You know, it's because of those spices and those different flavors, and textiles is exactly the same. The 19th century and all the, you know, the paisley that you got as a consequence of being in India. I don't think it can be under exaggerated how important all of this is. I mean, for me, what Cluny Lace should be is it should be something that the government is intervening on, because it is the last of what is a massive heritage in Nottingham of a
yeah.
certain kind of lace making. If this was Belgium, where they're very proud as well of their lace making, in the Flemish side of Belgium, there would have been an intervention. I just don't understand why we're letting these things just slide out of our hands.
You know what? I've been running Make It British since like the last 12 years. And up until Brexit, everything was looking like the demand for UK manufacturing was going up. UK manufacturers were feeling really confident. Everything was going really well. And now, with a combination of Brexit, the lockdowns, and also the cost of living crisis, a lot of them are feeling really nervous, but more importantly, they're feeling really unsupported. And that's why I wanted to get you on the show, because I know you do a lot of work in your various roles as all party. Actually, I need to get that right. Tell us exactly what your role is.
So we are the Secretariat for the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Ethics and Sustainability in Fashion. We were running two all-party parliamentary groups, the other being Textiles and Fashion, and we are now running just the one. I say just the one, it's really quite a lot of work. Tomorrow we're doing an event with Labour Behind the Label to promote awareness around the 10th anniversary of the Rana Plaza catastrophe that happened in Bangladesh, where garment workers were murdered by a fire that broke out in an unsafe garment factory, and where it became a lot more newsworthy that people could see the complexity of the supply chains, because lots of brands were making in that factory and it was very hard due to the convoluted supply chains. But when you look at somewhere like Cluny Lace, just to track back to then, that's a completely different kettle of fish. That is heritage, highly skilled, incredible output factory. And I think it's a tragedy that Brexit is getting in the way of business again and again. Ideology is getting in the way of logic. And of course, the EU would be our largest trading partner because they're on our doorstep. We have a shared history, we have a shared body identity, we have a shared body sizing quite often, we have locality. And of course, we would have built up these massive trading infrastructures with them, going back centuries. I mean, France, obviously, going back to, you think of Louis XIV and the Sun King and Versailles. Of course, the man was dripping in lace. I mean, it's, like, of course, we would be looking at the couture houses to elevate the opportunities for our lace. But I would imagine now they're going to Belgium, which is an hour on a train away
Yeah, I
with
mean,
no
some of
border.
the exactly. Some of the comments that I have received, so we've been raising the awareness and the plight of Cluny Lace since you told me about it. A reel that we did on Instagram has had like such amazing support from other small
Yeah.
businesses reaching out and saying we're in exactly the same situation. The same thing has happened on LinkedIn. I mean, I'll read you out just some of the comments
Yeah,
that people
please
have been
do.
saying. Things like. It's Brexit has given many foreign businesses an excuse to make it seem a bit of a waste of time bothering with us. And that was from someone that works in the motoring industry. We've had someone else saying the government has 100% killed our manufacturing, entrepreneurs and innovation. Someone here saying they're a new startup of sustainable delivery robot manufacturers, which is like an amazing, I mean, that's what the industry needs. We are battling tooth and nail for funding, investment and grants. Yet foreign competitors can get backing so much more easily and even from our own government. And then someone else who's a footwear designer has said she stopped prototyping in the UK because of increased costs and because most of the components were imported. If we hadn't have had the issue where we'd lost so many of our skills in the 80s and 90s and our supply chain had not been so fragmented, it wouldn't have been such an issue. So we'd still have all the dye houses here. So Cluny would probably, I don't know exactly when, and I'm trying to find out when they started sending their lace to France to be dyed, or whether that's already always happened. But we've lost so many of the dye houses, all the other parts of the infrastructure, which has made Brexit 100% worse, because I don't think the current government realised the complexity of supply chains, particularly for small businesses. It's very different, I think, for a lot of these small businesses who have, I mean, the average UK textile manufacturer employs less than 10 people. They don't have
so
a
it's
lot
an
of spare
SME.
staff. Yeah, they're micro businesses. And the paperwork, and someone said it's 180 pages worth of paperwork to wade through to deal with importing and exporting to France and the rest of Europe now.
So you can imagine from their point of view that, you know, we're one country and they're 27. Why would they bother with us? So we are now stuck trying to scrabble as the lesser partner, the smallest partner in any trade deal. And that's also impacting because the Australia trade deal, for instance, has put British farmers for their sheep, for instance, in jeopardy. And that's having an impact on our meat and our wool industry. So
Actually,
trade is not following logic either, because they're being so keen to get a new trade deals to try to look successful. And I think that this is one part of it, is the Brexit issue. The other part of it, you know, we've all heard the news with horror about CBI and about a trade body where there's been allegations of sexual misconduct, and there clearly needs to be a paradigm shift on what these trade organisations and associations are doing for us, because are they serving us? And I would argue that if the heritage skills that are the DNA of the UK are being so easily lost, they're not.
So the problem with our industry is not only is the supply chain fragmented, but we're not talking as one voice, are we? That is the issue. And I know you've tried really hard to bring the industry together and to be the one voice talking to Parliament and talking in Parliament and having these difficult conversations. But there's no one place that the manufacturers, particularly like Cluny, can go to for support and to be heard. And I also know when you've invited manufacturers to meetings at the Houses of Parliament, a lot of them, well, just for the very reason that they're very short-staffed or they've got other things going on, it's really hard to get them in there. Someone else has to represent them because they're too busy running their factories. And it's tough, isn't it? What do you think is the solution to bring the industry back together again and get support for these manufacturers?
I mean, my honest answer is I think there needs to be a whole new trade association for the sector that actually honestly represents it, that isn't so incumbent on membership funding, so that it could represent all the different threads. I think it needs to look at the heritage brands and really understand the nature of the sector as it is. I think that we can all PR the industry to the high heavens, but ultimately I think it's a failure if someone like Cluny Lace closes or relocates. And it's a failure on the existing system because it clearly hasn't got the messaging right. So, levelling up should be aligned with business. Supporting skills should be also supporting these brands, which, if you've run a business for 9 generations, you can run it for 15 generations. So those kinds of brands should be supported, because ultimately in the shifts to AI, in the shifts to digital, and the loss that will be incumbent on some jobs as we become more and more digital, those kind of highly technical skills, such as lace making, at that level, I just don't see those becoming digitized. So actually they're more of a long-term job option for somebody. And there is not, and also the other thing is that what Jenny Holloway always said about me was I never called being a garment worker low skilled. And I think it's because of my great grandmother that that I would never call that low skilled. I think she was a very skilled woman. So that make do amend aesthetic, which I think goes to the heart of making and craft, but also thickness of those people and the skills of that those people have. I've always respected it because I've always said to any policymaker, you try to make a suit and then tell me how easy you think that is. I think it's highly skilled and it's to be respected. And the problem is that fast fashion, as it's called, has decimated the price to the point where people don't understand value. So there's so many different threads to the problems, but fundamentally, in terms of the voice that the sector has, look, I mean, Fashion Roundtables have got no PR, but we've had over 2.2 billion media reach for the last 2 years. That's without paying for thousands of pounds of PR and marketing. But do I think that it's,
aren't you?
and a small team, but do I think it's effective in terms of outcomes? On some things I do, but on some things I think that it's frustrating that I think that some people who have got a certain degree of power would rather pretend that everything's okay rather than admit the truth. And I think we need to talk about the truth. If Cluny Lace closes, that's to me is a failure of the British fashion and textiles industry.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what do you think that Cluny Lace themselves should be doing right now to try and?
Well, I mean, they should be speaking to their MP,
Yeah.
and they should be asking for a meeting, and they should be engaging with them to see whether or not there's any local council funding to stopgap them. And then I think the case should be made for these heritage brands, because there is the Heritage Craft Association, who Daniel from that has done a podcast with Meg from my team and is a lovely person. And he's got a list of the critical crafts on their website. Those kind of organisations need to come together. And the problem with policy is that they always want more evidence. They always want to understand more about a sector. But as you say, if businesses are so small, they haven't got the resources to enter into it. So without spending on it, you're not going to get the outcome. And that's the bottom line. And I think that the problem is because these brands are struggling. In the good times, they don't think they need it. And in the bad times, they can't afford it.
Yeah, that's so true. And because with Cluny in particular and a lot of these heritage brands, it's not that easy for them to suddenly switch to another market. A lot of them are not that clued up on marketing. It's part of the reason I did my trade show, because they've got the customers they've got, and why would I want any more? I'm quite happy with the ones I've got. But then if those customers are cut overnight, finding new ones when your skill is in making stuff and not marketing can be tough, and like to lose 50% of your business.
I mean, is there an opportunity for them to open a factory in France? Because
That would be a
Normandy, I mean,
tragedy, wouldn't it?
of
Moving
course
all
it
those
would, but
Nottingham leaders lace machines. Yeah.
but that's the reality, is that I had a meeting with the Department of Normandy just after Brexit. They were looking for business to come there. So, this is the problem, is that if you make it difficult, someone else finds it attractive. And I think that is the point. The incentive would be for Cluny either to give up or to relocate. And that's ridiculous. As you said with that footwear person, they're looking at a different strategy to produce, because it's too problematic for them to produce it because the elements that go into the components. So I feel the trade associations have missed the opportunity to build in the infrastructure, which is what the fashion district should have been, of bringing in all the elements so that from design to delivery, it's all within a small corridor. And I think that that's a massive missed opportunity. And equally, I feel that it is their job to highlight the Cluny Laces of this world, because these are not I cannot imagine that happening in France. I just can't.
No, and it's this. I know you also recently were looking into a similar situation in Wales, where I know we're not down to our very last Welsh weaver, but there's still the industry there is still impacted.
Yeah, there's a handful of mills left, and Lots of them are, uh, not able to look at legacy. They've got aging workforces, aging machinery, and there's a myriad of different solutions, but none of them seem to really hit the nail on the head. And I think it's a very problematic situation because they become like theme parks rather than businesses.
So some people might turn around and say, well, it's their fault, they should have updated their machinery, but actually it's the quality of the old machinery that gives them such a beautiful lace. It's like when I went to John Smedley, they've still got a lot of their very original old machines, which they're never going to give up. They've got them alongside the whole garment knitting machines, but they have still kept the old machines because you can't get the knit that comes out of it. It looks very different to what comes out of the new machines. In fact, Ian, that runs John Smedley, said the Japanese are like snapping at his heels trying to buy the machines off him because no one else makes them anymore. And it's like what happened with the denim, the looms that weave denim as well, the selvedge denim. We lost all those years ago. There's like a couple left in this country, I think, and all the rest went out to Japan because Japan somehow value the heritage, don't they, and understand. We don't in this country. I think this is what a lot of this boils down to, this lack of respect for heritage. And I know AI and that has all got a place, but let's not forget there's still no robot that from start to finish can 100% make a beautiful dress. I think we're decades off that. We still need the skills.
So what do you think the trade associations should be doing?
I think understanding a little bit more about what the manufacturer's actual needs are, the little guys and not just the big guys. Like the British Fashion Council, I know they represent fashion, but they don't talk about where the clothes are made. And I know a manufacturer who stood at London Fashion Week with a placard saying, hang on a minute, let's not forget who made your clothes. Because behind every amazing fashion designer, there is an amazing and very skilled manufacturer or team of manufacturers that's putting those garments down the catwalk. And I think until manufacturing and design go hand in hand and respected equally, then I think we're always going to struggle.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of elements of trying to become events organisations because that's look like that's where the money is, or do policy because quite frankly there was no policy reports done until I started doing them with Fashion Roundtable, and now suddenly everyone's doing them, which begs the question why. I think that to be honest with you, I think the trade association's core business should be promoting and supporting the sectors. And yes, that means helping them through these transitions, whether that's towards using less waste or circularity or regenerative or whatever these, or greater inclusion policies, or whatever those things are, those are commendable. But their core business should be promoting that talent and showcasing that talent. And that means whether that's reflecting it back to government and saying, look, there's an amazing lace factory. It's the last of its kind. This is what the heritage was. I don't want to lose it. We don't need to lose it. What can we do? Because I think that's what the car industry would do. And equally promoting it for sales. That's their job. They are not think tanks. They are associations for trade. And I think that these, particularly in the fashion industry, they've lost their way because they've tried to become think tanks, because I guess what launched the first think tank for the fashion industry, and now suddenly everyone's a think tank. And ultimately, that's not their job. Their core business should be, we have amazing talent coming out of the UK if it's the fashion side, but most of them don't last longer than 10 years. And on the textile side, we've got an aging population and demographic and a lack of follow through of how do we keep those into legacy into the next 100 years. How do we keep them going? What do we need to do? How do we get the support? How do we get awareness? How do we go from one lace factory back up to 5? How do we get the trade deal negotiated so that there's ease of market for those brands to get their product? Because actually sending it to France for dyeing and back shouldn't be that hard. That shouldn't be that hard. It's not that deep. It's simple. That's not going to 5 different countries. So those are the things. I think that's their core business.
And what are your plans with Fashion Roundtable going forward?
So we are in negotiations with a different organisation, not a trade association, to work on our funding bids and our partnerships. I see that as a very important next step to solidify, because I'm not going to lie, since we left the EU, it's been challenging for Fashion Roundtable as well. A lot of the funding that was open before to support reports and evidence and events has gone. And I certainly don't feel comfortable charging people to attend an event in the way that we might have done a nice glossy event and charged a bit. I just don't think people have got the money, or if they have, they're a bit anxious. And we did so much content for free over lockdown. We were doing these weekly kind of like get-togethers just to keep people going, really. Like mentally, I mean, we both stepped up, Kate. But I think that is where I see us going. I'm very much looking at kind of regenerative practice and how we can support those localized supply chains. We've done a lot of work on wool, a lot of work on that. I think it's really exciting. That's where I see us more. We're doing a meeting with the Parliamentary Labour Party next month so that they can gain some insights from the sector. That's a Fashion Roundtable event that we're doing with them in partnership with Steph Peacock, who's the Shadow Culture Minister. And it's really because I see it as our job to make sure that all of the parties are engaged with what the issues are.
And what do you think the government should be doing to...
I think there should be... the thing is the government can't be expected to know about Cluny Lace unless the trade associations are promoting Cluny Lace. So I don't entirely blame the government on this, actually. I think that, they can't be alert to every critical...
It was because Charles Mason, who runs Cluny Lace, it was because he felt compelled to write into the Financial Times about their situation, thought I think people should be aware of what's happening, and that's how the BBC then picked up on it.
If the CEO of Cluny Lace wants to have a meeting and then we talk out a strategy, but he has to, it's the time element, and probably he hasn't got any time if he's trying to keep his business going.
Down to 4 people. They had 20 just a few years ago. They were doing very well up until 2016, 2017, and now they're down to 4. He said, if we lose one more, we can't carry on anymore.
You kind of forget what was there before, and you just go, do you remember when? And then it's gone. And once it's gone, it's gone. So I think that if it was me, I would be getting in touch with the Heritage Craft Association, seeing if they can get them some support and some. The King is the president of that organisation, and they should be speaking to the local MP about what can be done to help them in the short term whilst they look at longer term. So short term, MP, try and get some local council cash injection. Mid-term, what does survival look like? Long term, where do they need to grow the business?
Yeah. Well, I hope, just on the back of the fact that so many people have raised their hands to say, I didn't know that, about this, and how can we save them? And a lot of designers saying on my Instagram post, I'm going to definitely order from them now. Maybe there'll be a bit of a Cluny Lace revival. Suddenly we'll see every designer using Cluny Lace, hopefully going forward. That's what needs to happen. And ideally the colours that don't have to go to France. Apparently they can do black, white and cream. Hasn't got to go anywhere near France.
Interesting. So, I mean, the thing as well is this, that handmade beautiful lace is a world of difference from that shoddy... manufactured from a certain country in a different time zone lace, like it's horrible. You can't compare. It's magic.
Exactly.
Absolute magic. What do you think should happen, Kate? What do you think would be the best outcome?
I mean, I'm a bit cynical, I suppose. I don't know whether the trade associations, the government will get their acts together, and I always think it's better from the kind of ground up. It's going to be small businesses supporting other small businesses. Like if I can raise awareness about it, which means that 100 more designers find out about Cluny Lace and order from them and actually buy from them, so they don't feel they have to put their hand out for support because, you know, they've found new business elsewhere, then I think that's what we need to do. Because I get frustrated. I mean, part of the reason I was frustrated working for like Marks and Spencer's in corporate for years was how slowly everything moves. And of course, the government is even slower. And any you know, I remember the whole PPE saga that we worked on together during lockdown and how slow everything moved when it needed to happen really, really fast. And I just think I'm fed up with waiting for people to wait for these associations to do anything, and we're better off.
I don't think you can rely on these associations until they get their core business straight. And unfortunately, at the moment, I think they've seen Fashion Roundtable as a threat to their core business, to their identity, when I never was, because I was simply launching a think tank to create policy and non-partisan apolitical evidence. That's not a threat to an association on any level. But unfortunately, if they're stepping into that space, they're avoiding what I believe is their core business, which is looking after and promoting the brands. And I think that's their issue rather than my issue. And therefore, no, I don't think the guy from Cluny Lace can wait for them to fix the problem. But that's why he's got to take the law into his own hands. I think when the dust settles, stakeholders need to understand, as they have with CBI, is this an organisation that represents their needs? And if it isn't, what are they going to do about it? Because I've had lots of people, Kate, circling me for the last 3 years going, will you set up a trade association? Will you do this? Will you do that? And I haven't set one up, but they would need to really want it for it to happen, because I think what CBI has shown is that there needs to be women-led business organisations. You know, the BRA is run by Helen Dickinson, and she's nothing but lovely and engaging and is brilliant when you hear her on Radio 4, but equally just as brilliant when you meet her in person. And I think that there's a place for that for our sector, but at the moment it's a massive gap.
Yeah. Tamara, thank you so much for your time today.
You're very welcome.
How can everyone get in touch with you, find out how they can get involved? Tell us.
Well, unoriginally, everything's pretty much Fashion Roundtable. We don't have TikTok, but that's it on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and then on Twitter it's just Fashion Round Tab, because there's not enough characters to get the LE in. And if you go on the website, you can sign up to our newsletter, which goes out every Tuesday and is always packed with interesting content.
Brilliant. Amazing. Tamara, you've been a superstar. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Happy to promote heritage culture. It is our culture and we shouldn't lose it so quickly and easily, I think. Thank you, Kate.
Amazing. Thanks, Tamara. Bye.